Assalamualaikum, hello and good morning. Today I will be introducing to the chapter 6, Education Psychology, which is the cognitive view of learning. So there are several subtopics in the chapter, which is the comparing cognitive and behavioral view, the importance of knowledge in cognitions, cognitive view of memory, sensory memory, perceptions, the role of attention, elaboration, organization, imagery, and context. So this is the comparing cognitive and behavioral view. So according to the cognitive view, knowledge and strategies are learned. Then changes in knowledge and strategy makes changes in behavior. According to the behavioral view, the new behavior itself are learned. Both behavioral and cognitive theories believe reinforcement is important in learning. But for different reasons, the strict behaviorist maintains that reinforcement strengthens responses, which cognitive theories perceive that reinforcement as a source of information about what is likely to happen if behaviors are repeated or changed. Moving on, this is the comparing cognitive and behavioral view. In the cognitive view, learning is extending and transforming the understanding we already have, not simply writing associations on the blank slates of our brains. Instead of being passively influenced by environmental events, people actively choose, practice, pay attention, ignore, reflect, and make many other decisions as they pursue goals. Older cognitive view emphasize the acquisition of knowledge, but new approach stress its constructions. The next one, the importance of knowledge in cognitions. When we learn about cognitive psychology, we know something new. For example, the rule of tennis. The cognitive approach suggests that one of the most important elements in the learning process is what the individuals bring to new learning situations. What we already know is the foundation and frame for constructing all future learning. Knowledge determines to a great extent what we will pay attention to, perceive, learn, remember, and forget. So, for example, when we learning, for example, we didn't know about the rule of tennis, but we are willing to learn. And when we bring something new, for example, learning about the rule of tennis, we have the basic foundation and frame for constructing all future learning about the tennis, for example. Moving on, this is the cognitive view of memory. There are numerous number of theories of memory, but the most common are the information processing explanations by Ashcraft. And then early information processing view of memory use the computer as a model. Like the computer, the human mind takes in information, perform operation on it to change its form or content, stores the information, retrieve it when needed, and generate response to it. This is the information processing system, the early information processing system. So the information is encoded in sensory memory. So this is the input sensory registers, for example, sounds, image, and we pay attention to it. And then it will go to the short-term memory to maintain and rehearsal, and also to the do the processing of encoding or decoding to the long-term memory. So the long-term memory, you can retrieve it, and also you can give response to it. So the information is encoded in sensory memory, where attention determines what will be held in the short-term memory for further uses. In short-term memory, new information connects with knowledge from long-term memory. The information will be processed and connected. Information become a part of the long-term memory and can be activated to return to the short-term memory. So this is the early information processing system. Moving on to the next one. This is the recent versions. So in the recent version, there is a three major part, which is the sensory memory, long-term memory, and working memory. So the information is encoded in sensory memory, where perception and attention determines what will be held in the working memory. So the first one is sensory memory. We receive something, and then it will encode to the working memory. And then in the working memory, processes will manage the flow of information and integrate new information with knowledge from long-term memory, which when we activate it again, it will become part of the working memory. And then it will go to the implicit memory form without conscious efforts. The three elements of the system interact with each other to guide perceptions, represent, organize, and interpret the informations. This is to apply and modify propositions, concepts, image, schemes, and strategy to construct a knowledge. So this is the recent version. There are sensory memory, working memory, long-term memory. There is also attention and okay. So the first step is the sensory memory. The input is this goes to the sensory memory, and then it will go to the working memory, or sorry, the working memory, and then it will save through the implicit memory to the long-term memory, and then we can retrieve from the long-term memory. For example, when the knowledge is influenced, it will go to the working memory and we can respond to it. Or sensory memory, we can immediately save it to the long-term memory through the implicit memory, and then go to the knowledge influence, working memory, and then response. Moving on, this is the sensory memory. Sensory memory is a stimuli from the environment, such as sights, sounds, smells, touch, taste, and many more, that constantly bombard our body mechanism for seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and feelings. Sensory memory is the initial processing that transforms these incoming stimuli into information so we can make sense of them. Next one is this is the capacity, durations, and the content of sensory memory. The capacity of sensory memory is very large, and it can take in more information than we can possibly handle at once. But this vast amount of sensory information is fragile in durations, that it lasts less than 3 seconds. So for example, when we touch the table, we can sense that it is hard, it is sturdy, and we can see that the table is, for example, white in color. Then when we let go, because of the durations is fragile, it lasts less than 3 seconds. So for example, when we let go, after a few seconds, we already forgot that it is a sturdy, but we know already that it is a sturdy table, for example. Or when we touching something new, for example, slime. We never touched it before. We touch it, it feels soft, it feels for example wet, for example. And then when we let go of it, because it is the first time we touch the slime, after a few seconds, because of the duration is very fragile, we already forgot that how is the touching of the slime feels like. Moving on, this is the perception. Perception is defined as the process by which individuals organize, interpret, and give meaning to the sensory information from their environment. Perception involves the mental interpretation of stimuli based on prior knowledge, experience, and cognitive structures such as schemes. Perception is important in learning because it influences what information learner attended to, how they process it, and how they store it in the memory. It is not just a passive perception of stimuli, but an active, constructive process that shapes how we understand and respond to the world around us. So this is the example of Gestalt principle. Gestalt principle of perception explains how we see pattern in the world around us. So for example, we have figure ground, proximity, similarity, and closure. Figure ground is, what do you see? A face or a vase? Make one figure, the other ground. So what is figure ground actually? Figure ground is we tend to separate objects from their background. This helps us focus on what's important. For example, when we're reading, the letter are figure and the paper is the background. So when we are reading, we focus on the letter and we erase the background. Moving on, the proximity. You see these lines as three groups because of the proximity of the lines. We can see there are three groups with spaces and three group of the three lines with the same height or length. So proximity is the object that are close to each other are seen as a group. For example, words are formed because letters are close together. Spaces is the one who separates them. How about similarity? Similarity is you see these lines as an alternating pattern because of the similarity in heights of lines. So similarity is the object that are similar in appearance, for example color, shape, size, are perceived as belonging together. Moving on to the closure. Closure is we tend to fill in gap to perceive a whole object. So as you can see here, we can see a circle clearly. You perceive a circle instead of series of curved lines. And then for example, a broken circle is still seen as a circle because our minds close the gap. Gestalt principle help explain how we make sense of complex visual information quickly and efficiently. The Gestalt principle are a set of theories in psychology that explain how people naturally organize visual elements into groups or unified. The term Gestalt means shapes or forms in German, and the central idea is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts of attentions. If every variation in color, movement, sound, smell, temperature, and other feature ended up in working memory, life would be impossible. But attention is selective. By paying attention to selected stimuli and ignoring others, we limit the possibility of what we will perceive and process. What we pay attention to is guided to a certain extent by what we already know and what we need to know. So, attention is involved in and influenced by all the three memory processes. Attention and multitasking. So, for example, driver who text or chatting say they are multitasking, and often they think all is fine. Adolescents are multitasking more than ever, perhaps because they have access to so much technology. In one survey of 8 to 18 years old, about one-third reported multitasking with multimedia while they do their homework, and also using media about 6 to 7 hours each day on average. So you may be multitasking right now. For example, Moreno conducted actual real-time samples of how older adolescents use the internet. They describe how many they also describe how many college students do homework. So for example, adolescents, because they have access to so much technology, they tend to multitasking. For example, we listening to the music while doing homework, or for example, we scrolling through the social media, and then doing the homework, or maybe cooking, for example. Attention and multitasking. Actually, there are two types of multitasking: sequential multitasking, in which you switch back and forth from one task to another, but focus on only one at a time. This is sequential multitasking. And simultaneous multitasking, in which there is overlapping focus on several tasks at a time. For tasks that are at all complicated, no matter how good you have become at multitasking, your performance of the task will suffer. In complicated situation, the brain prioritizes and focus on one thing. You may be able to listen to quiet instrumental music in the background while you study, but favorite song with word will steal your attention away and it will take time to get back to what you were doing. Also, for example, when you listening to your favorite music, there will be a catchy lyrics that will steal your attentions, and because it steal your attentions, you will take a time to get back to what you were doing. Moving on, attention and teachings. The first step in learning is paying attention. Students cannot process information that they do not recognize or perceive. In the context of teaching, attention refers to the process of guiding and maintaining students' focus on relevant learning tasks or information. It is a critical component in helping students notice, process, and retain what is being taught. For example, science teacher asks a provocation question at the start of the lesson. So for example, what do you think would happen if there were no gravity for one day? Ask the teacher to the students. This question will capture a student's attention, makes them curious and get them mentally engaged and more likely to listen actively and retain key concept of the gravity. Moving on, this is the elaboration, organization, imagery, and context. So for elaboration is adding a meaning to new information by connecting with already existing knowledge. So for example, while learning about the water cycle, a student relates it to seeing puddle disappear after the rain, connecting to the concept of evaporating to real life. The next one is organizations. Organization is structuring content in a logical or meaningful way to aid memory. For example, a student uses a timeline to organize historical events, making it easier to understand cause and effect. The next one is imagery. Imagery is using mental or visual picture to enhance learning. For example, when studying a digestive system, a student imagines food traveling through tunnel with different stations. The next one is context. Context is a learning material within a relevant or familiar stations. For example, a student learns mathematic fractions by cutting and sharing slices of pizza during classroom activity. So, elaboration, organization, imagery, and context help students to elaborate when we ask them to translate information, create example, explaining to the peer, or creating a metaphor. And that is all that I will cover in the chapter 6, which is cognitive view of learning. Thank you for your listening, and goodbye.